really, Jesus is the singularity, and every iteration of that word, which has been foreshadowed by the Bible, of course, as a historical document, but even beyond historical document, fiction itself speaks to this thought, to this image. We singularly believe it was a historical fact, an event, that he died and he rose again on the third day. Welcome back, everyone, to the Pinedo Brothers Podcast. I am JP, and I got my brother,
Peter. I'm right here.
We are the Pinedo Brothers, filmmaking brothers working to revitalize the world of Catholic art through film. And happy Easter to all. This is our Easter special.
Woo! Happy Easter.
Easter is the most important, biggest celebration, the most important day of the year. But we oftentimes don't really understand why it's so important. I think at least in pop culture, it's definitely been regulated to fourth or fifth place as far as holidays in the year. Yeah. I would probably say Christmas, and then Halloween, and then maybe Thanksgiving, New Year's.
Halloween. I don't understand how that became so big all of a sudden.
Well, it's a great holiday. I'm not trying to take anything away from Halloween, but Easter should take first place in our hearts and first place in our minds. So we will start unpacking a little bit about why this day is so important. And I think it'll be a bit of a discovery for both of us. We hope that you also will be able to be discovering and remembering things that are important about the day. Mm-hmm. Because even if you're not listening to this on Easter, when this is streaming live, it'll still be Easter season, and it's another 50 days of this. So you have plenty of time to enjoy it.
Catholics do we have a season of Lent, so we take sacrificing seriously and giving things up and mortifying. But we take celebrating more seriously because we have 40 days for Lent, but 50 days for Easter. So we definitely like to party.
Play hard, party harder. I mean, work hard, party harder.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of I think it's the Simpsons thing where have you seen, what I'm talking about, where there's like Catholic heaven and Protestant heaven? No. There's one person is in heaven. He's like, what's going on? And they're like playing croquet and stuff like that. And they're just like having some kind of, I don't know, there's like a bunch of British people and they're all like playing croquet. And he's like, where are the others? And they're like, they went over to Catholic heaven. And they like look over and there's like a whole bunch of people like partying and Irish dancing and like drinking and then like a lot of fighting each other.
They're still partying or they're still fighting in heaven, I see. And it's Irish heaven. It makes sense.
Well, it was like Irish and Mexicans and all of these.
I love it. That's awesome. I'll need to look that up after this. Okay. After that foray into pop culture, I think we should talk about another little pop culture reference, the Chronicles of Narnia, which I think is a perfect example of Easter, the power of Easter, the magic of Easter, that as C.S. Lewis calls it, the deep magic, and the deeper magic. There's deep magic and there's deeper magic. And evil, the White Witch, knows about the deep magic. And the White Witch, of course, is the placeholder for the devil in this. The devil, you can picture, it's easier for me to picture, instead of the White Witch being the devil, another female character that Mel Gibson had to play the devil in The Passion of the Christ. That is a very, when I think of the devil, I think that's a really excellent example. And if you remember that scene where the devil is holding a baby, and the baby signifies really in that scene the world. And she is sort of the Black Madonna, the one that's in opposition to Mary and Jesus. And the devil there is saying, look, the world is my child. This is, I understand the deep magic of the world. I understand that Adam has fallen. And that this is my domain and you are not welcome here, as Jesus is being scourged. It's a very powerful scene. Well, in the Chronicles of Narnia, the White Witch also understands that Aslan has to die. The children have fallen. There's a traitor amongst the children, the main characters in the Chronicles of Narnia, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the first one. And by that, she has domain in this field, and that she is able to lay claim to the traitor, the child, which is really a placeholder for man. And that person, that child is hers. Therefore, the whole world is hers in this world, in this sort of setting. And Aslan understands the deep magic, but he also knows deeper magic, as C.S. Lewis would say. And this is what Easter is. The Easter is a day of incredible magic that we remember, this grace that comes from beyond the world. And we really, it's odd to me how Christians are so hesitant to speak of the word magic, because I think it's been co-opted for more nefarious purposes. Lewis didn't understand magic that way. And I don't think that we should look at this day in anything but magic, because the resurrection is miraculous. The resurrection is something that we should remember in awe, because we can't understand it. Peter, what's your immediate take on this?
It's the ultimate, it's the ultimate magic. It's just wild to me that, like you were saying, especially in the Passion, how that is portrayed, where the devil is mocking God. He's mocking the Blessed Virgin Mary, and he's mocking, the baby child, Jesus. And he's saying, look, you did this, and you played right into my hands. You played right into my plan. I understand the world is mine. And then just like the resurrection is just the complete undoing of the devil's plans, where he is just unable. I think Narnia does a great job of portraying this, where the devil is just completely did not see this coming, and is has no idea how to respond to that. And there is no response to it, because Jesus did die and then he resurrected. And so it's just an incredible, it's the ultimate victory. And as Christians, we get to live an extended, Christianity has been around for 2,000 years. And so I think as Christians, we're just living in that victory for 2,000 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's not saying that life is not a struggle still. I think the Triduum, we're recording this on Holy Thursday, and the Triduum, which we're just now beginning, which are the 3 days that we remember, that we celebrate each step along the way that leads to the resurrection, to Easter Sunday, is a perfect example of how the battle that we face as Christians continues in light of this Easter joy. On Holy Thursday, this is when Jesus is gearing up. So the Thursday before Good Friday, the day before Calvary, Jesus, he doesn't just prepare for the next day. Jesus prepares us for the next however long this world lasts after Easter. It's an amazing thing that he doesn't just redeem us. So he's going to redeem us the next day, but he does something that's so crucial. He leaves us his flesh. He leaves us his body and blood, and tells us to eat his body and blood in remembrance of him. He's staying behind at the same time as he's leaving us. That's mind-boggling. And that's when he does the Last Supper on Holy Thursday. He institutes the Eucharist for us. In that way, we're never really alone, no matter how much we have to battle after Easter, because the battle for us is not over. The battle for our soul, the battle for our children's souls is not over. But we can be assured, so long as we fight, of victory, thanks to this day, thanks to Easter. And then, of course, Good Friday. We move to the Good Friday, and it's a day of sadness. It's a dark day. It's a day that we remember with fasting and with prayer. It's not a comfortable time for us Catholics. But at the same time, it's important to remember that, "Oh, death, where is your sting?" That line that we say during this time, "Oh, death, where is your sting?" Because, well, it's not a new idea. There's an archetype that's out there of the death and the resurrection of the hero, the archetypical hero. You see that in many myths. And you see that continuing on in our myths of this day. Like, for example, the Wachowski siblings are anything but Christians, but the Matrix has the death and resurrection of the hero there. It's something that we are continually captured by this idea. And the singularity of, well, really, Jesus is the singularity in every iteration of that word, because we as Christians believe in the radical truth that he actually existed. He existed as the God-man, and he truly, like, it was a historical fact, an event, that he died and he rose again on the third day, which has been foreshadowed by every great storyteller beforehand, by the Bible, of course, as a historical document, but even beyond historical document, fiction itself speaks to this thought, to this image. And we singularly believe that it actually happened. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that there's a lot to unpack there, but the idea that Christ died and then rose, and that we are people very just how the resurrection is so present in our faith is really evidenced throughout history, because I don't know how many martyrs we have in the church, but we have like thousands, I'm sure, throughout the ages, many different persecutions and times of trials. And there are so many Christians who, like, if we were a faith that was focused on, if we were a faith, and we're back, okay. If we were a faith that's focused on our just this world, and like many people will say, Christianity is it is good for society in that it helps people regulate their emotions and get through tough times, and like gives them structure. But it's evidence in more than that, because of how people will lay down their lives for their faith, and undergo like the worst sufferings. Like, one of my favorite movies to watch during this time is For Greater Glory, a movie about one of the persecutions of the Catholic Church in Mexico. And you have like a child here who is being brutally tortured for his faith in order to get him to deny Christ. And this is a true story. Like, he refused to do it, and he just shouted "Viva Cristo Rey" even louder each time they tortured him more. And so it's very much like we're a people that's very locked on this idea of we're not focused on this world, and that we're focused on a deeper magic.
Right. And that's something that I really want to drive home on this little time that we have together, because you know how much I admire and respect Jordan Peterson. I think that if we could aspire to his understanding and his compassion, we would be doing quite well. But I also recognize, I love his intro sequence in his podcast. Yeah, I love seeing all those pictures fly by. And correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, maybe one of our commenters can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think the last image is Calvary in his intro sequence. There's the image of Christ on the cross at Calvary. And for the noble pagan, which there have been many, and I'm not sure Peterson really qualifies as that, but conjure up an image of a person that strives with every fiber of his being to know the good and do it without knowing the Christian truth, without knowing the Christian reality to its fullest. And Peterson, I think, would fall in that class. And without that, this world always ends in Calvary. And not saying that that's bad, not saying that Calvary is bad. Obviously, we believe, because we call Friday that Christ died good. It's not bad Friday. This is Good Friday. So until we actually accept the singularity, that is, that Christ rose from the dead, our experience has to always come to an end at Good Friday, because death has a sting. Death has a finality to it. And the pain that we experience at best can just have a greater significance attached to it at best. Instead of that pain actually redeeming, instead of that pain leading to the great reality, which is the resurrection, then that is the end of the story. And that has been the end of the story for eons prior to the resurrection. And it continues to be the end of the story for those that are not able to grasp the historical reality. That's the part that I really want to I really want to drive home with this long diatribe. Here we go. Peterson speaks quite a lot about Nietzsche. And we've spoken about Nietzsche as well, how Nietzsche spoke of the death of God and how man killed it. Peterson points out how Nietzsche would say that Christianity died by its own hand, because Christianity gave birth to the scientific method. Christianity gave birth to rational and reasoned thought over a long period of time, where the university system sprang up, and we started to look at the world in a very systematic way and make realizations. He gave Christianity the reason, like the props for that coming into being. And so he saw rationalism, which is a different thing from reasoned thought. He saw rationalism as the death of Christianity and therefore the death of God. But you can't kill something with your mind or your words that really exists. You might be able to kill a thought or an idea with your mind or with your words, but if something actually exists in reality, if it is just like God is, then we are not powerful enough to kill God. And he really believed that we had. And that was, as we've said, that was a torture and a terror for him, because this is not a good thing. And people live in this reality now where God is dead. The post-God world is real for many people. And you see the rush to suicide that comes with that kind of idea. Chesterton calls that the suicide of thought. Mm-hmm. But the reality of the resurrection, our podcast, I was careful to end it with the empty tomb, our podcast intro. And that image of the empty tomb is the Christian reality. It is that which we know, by the blood of the martyrs, like you spoke about, by the gift of faith that we've received, maybe from our parents or directly from above. Always directly from above, but maybe through the hands of our parents, or maybe not. So that's a long way of saying, again, the singularity of Jesus. He is the singularity. Got that, Pete?
I recently watched a musical called.
You had to.
I recently watched a musical called Carrie, and this one was a little rough, because I think it was very much of this idea that this suffering is all that we have. There is a crucifixion, and then there is no resurrection. That type of idea. It was very much, let's say, yeah, like that idea. I kind of got the feeling that it was written by someone who was raised like very sheltered, very like in a very sheltered Christian kind of maybe puritanical kind of living, and were very upset about it. Because it had one main character who was, the main character was raised by a very like strict, very tyrant kind of Christian mother. And this mother had like all these weird, like pseudo-Christian ideas. And because of the way she was raised, this girl was like an outcast at her school. Everyone made fun of her all the time. And so she was just always bullied and was very much just an outcast. And she would go to her mother for love, and her mother would love her, but also then like abuse her because she was, feeding her all of these tyrannical ideas. But the play ends with basically literally everybody dying. And everyone is sad, and there's all this suffering, and then it just ends. And you're like, oh, okay. But I think this is the idea that if there's no, like without the resurrection, Christianity is a moot point. It's dead.
We have all people to be pitied, as Paul says, without the resurrection.
Right. And I think what this play does a good job of portraying is how completely void and empty Christianity is without any sense of love or resurrection. Because Christ rises from the dead, and he dies for us out of love. And so it's missing the whole point of Christianity. The whole point of Christianity is love. And yes, it involves sacrifice and giving of oneself, and that involves pain. So that pain, that factor of pain is true. But it completely misses the point. And I think the reason that it misses the point is because it ignores the resurrection portion of Christianity.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think, what is it with people ignoring the reality of, or ignoring that section of Christianity? Because I think that is the sticking point for most non-Christians, is the resurrection. And I also think that many Christians have a huge sticking point with it as well.
Why do they ignore the resurrection? Well, I mean, of course, there's going to be lots of different reasons, but I think that for many people, it might just be something too fantastic, too deep, too loving to like imagine, because it is hard to comprehend that that we as Christians believe that the creator of the universe became one of us and then suffered and died, and then rose. And so I kind of think that like there might be people who are more willing to believe that the creator could come down and suffer, and then die and then be gone. It's very much of that. I think that we live in that kind of mentality where all there is this like humdrum kind of hopeless pain. And I think that's kind of, from a certain perspective, is understandable, because we see a lot of pain and a lot of suffering around us. And we see things like in this play, like so much bullying. And there was a couple of musical numbers that were about like, in this world, if you want to get by, you have to bully other people, because it's either a killer be killed kind of world.
Survival of the fittest, that's social Darwinism that we were talking about.
Yeah. And so it's easy to not see any further past that.
Yeah. I think that if we were, okay, it's possible that there was this great man, Jesus, and that he did some amazing things and had some truly incredible thoughts. And it's possible that those incredible thoughts that have changed the world have led him to die, led him to be killed by his enemies. But if that man, Jesus, rose from the dead 3 days after being killed by his enemies, then he's not just a great man. He's not just a man. He is God. He is the God man. It's real. It means that in order to believe in the resurrection, you need to truly believe. You need to believe that God walked among us and that he died for us. And that is where we're headed. That is I like to think of us as a ray. You know, we have a point in which we exist, and we didn't exist before that point. And we have an ongoing path to God. And since God is never ending, that path just keeps on going. That if Christ really rose from the dead, then he is where we should be heading at all times. Christ, the God man. That reality is difficult. That reality is hard to understand. Like you said, it's too fantastic. But it is the great sticking point, because if it is real, it changes everything. I can imagine someone like Peterson not being able to take that sort of a leap of courage, leap of faith. He's incredibly courageous. He's probably the bravest thinker of our generation. And yet when you hear him speak about God, there's this fear of that. Because, what if you're wrong? It's like falling in love. What happens? It's scary. I mean, many people fall in love, obviously, and many people do take that leap of faith, but it doesn't make it easy. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that as humans, I think that we have an innate sense, honestly, like we have this sense of the fantastic. And I think that's something that's pretty awesome about being human, because I love like wildlife and animals, but they are focused on the ground. Cows are always eating grass. They're always looking down, and deers, like all of these different wildlife, they're looking down at whatever it is that's sustaining them. We, as human beings, have the ability to look up and to contemplate things that are greater and bigger than us. And I think that as humans, that is integral to who we are. And so this idea that that suffering and this humdrum kind of kill or be killed mentality is all that there is I think that we know as humans is intrinsically, we know that is not true, because we have this calling to something greater and bigger. Like if you go hike a mountain, you have this, something moves you as you survey the land, something moves you. And so I think we have this deeper sense of that the humdrum of life is not all there is. And so I think that we have the ability to understand that something like the resurrection is possible. It's not because it's within our nature to have something like that. That's my first thoughts there. There a certain line comes to me with this. As Catholics, we have the vigil mass for Easter. There's this line as the priest is processing up into the completely dark church with the giant Easter candle lit up. He's processing into the church, and he stops at certain points to chant different lines. And one of them is, "Oh, happy fault." And when he says this, he's referring to the sin of Adam and Eve. he calls it a happy fall, which when I first like realized what he was saying, I was like, oh my, like what is, that's kind of crazy. Like, what does he mean by a happy fall? How can sin entering the world be a good thing? How can we call it a happy fault? Because it has brought the original sin has taken us away from that kind of paradise sense state of living, where we are experiencing suffering and disease and all these different kinds of things that make it hard for us to look up and make us look down. But they call it a happy fall. So what do they mean by that? And I think what they mean by that is the resurrection, because we as humans have this suffering, and this is true, this is real. But it's a happy fall because without it, we would have never have gotten Christ. We would have never had the complete and utter love of God shown to us in such a deeply intimate and real way, where God becomes one of us. I don't think that without the fall, we would have had Jesus coming down as one of us, which is so crazy, to think about. Like, this is, and it's so exciting that our human nature is elevated by the fact that the second person of the Trinity becomes a human being. That's something like not even the angels have, that not even they can say. Although, like, I don't think they're jealous of us because they're perfect beings. But it's wild to think about that we as human beings have the second person of the Trinity is a human being like us, with the same with the flesh and everything that is human. And so it is just this radical, really wild idea that we as Christians hold integrally as part of our very identity. And I think that's what things like those plays and like Nietzsche and all of those like really miss.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it seems like the more you're able to actually see and realize of the world, the more that you can miss of the very simple things that people who are more limited seem to grasp innately. And I love that line from Easter Vigil Mass as well, that, oh, happy fall, the happy fall, because we as Catholics believe that the fall is how pain and suffering came into this world. The fall of Adam ushered in not just Calvary, not just the pain and suffering of Christ, but also all of our pain and suffering. It's now through the sweat of our brow and through, the cries of a woman that we come into this world, the cries of pain. And it's continual pain through the whole way. And yet we still refer to the fall, which caused so much pain and still causes so much pain, as happy because of Christ. Because without it, we wouldn't have Christ. We wouldn't have the God-man who dies for us and then rises on the third day. It's interesting because you think about it, we are oftentimes, I know I've said this, God, why is this happening? Why is this just seems, I don't see a reason for this happening, And generally those are moments of pain, some in some way, some worse than others. And we, no matter what, Chesterton says in The Man Who Is Thursday, the secret that God whispers in our ear is, I too have suffered. And no matter what our pain is, we know that God himself on Good Friday said, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. And I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but my God, why have you forsaken me? If our own Savior says that, then we know that our own Savior has experienced pain and suffering, and he rose. And he, of his own accord, experienced pain and suffering for us so that we may rise too. And in that way, we can see the pain and suffering that we have now as just future steps that we can take to get to our end, our ultimate end. You know, we don't understand. It doesn't mean that we understand why, you know, babies are killed, innocent babies are killed every day through abortion, mutilated and torn like the DC-5 were. We don't understand why, you know, like why there are so many children's coffins. Why do children die? You know, we don't understand why people are dying in Ukraine or dying in Afghanistan, that innocent people that, you know, especially in Afghanistan, the people that have helped the United States and now being tortured and killed, or why the Muslims or the Christians in communist China are being tortured and killed at this moment. You know, we don't understand any of that. But we know that we have a Savior that understands pain. We know that we have a Savior that experienced it with us and that he rose for us. That changes the problem. People always have the problem of pain, but Easter puts that problem on its head. All of a sudden, it becomes a happy fall. All of a sudden, the pain that we experience and that we see in this world can be hollowed and holied and made into something that leads to glory. It doesn't just lead to something that makes us better, makes us stronger. That would be too simple. But it's a step along the way to the ultimate good. And if it was different, if it was a perfect world without any pain and suffering, or even a better world without any pain and suffering, then it wouldn't be our world. It wouldn't be Christ that dies for us and rises for us. It would be something that we would have no place in. Our world is messy because we're in it. And Christ died for us because we're messy people that live in this messy world. And if we weren't messy people, then we wouldn't be you. We wouldn't be me. We would be some other thing, some Ottoman somewhere, some soulless automation. And so the fall of Adam is happy because we are good, because despite that we're messy, maybe even because we're messy. It's a happy fall of Adam.
And this is where we get the idea of that as Christians, we are a resurrection people. We are the resurrection people. We're not, I think that's an idea that JP2, John Paul II, really preached about a lot, if I'm not mistaken, that we're people that are joyful. Because our faith is joyful. And it's not like this sense of just trying to always be positive, because we're not ignoring pain. We're not trying to say like, oh, I know you're suffering, but just look upwards and
stiff upper lip.
Think of God, I'm like,
offer it up.
it's deeper than that, because we I think are able to take our faith enables us to look our suffering in the eye and to confront it, because that's what Christ did. He confronted the brutal and barbaric crucifixion, and all of that led up to it was deeply cruel and deeply painful. And he confronted that, took it on, and underwent everything through it, and then beat it, and then rose again. And so I think that's what our faith does. It doesn't call us to ignore the pain that's going on in the world, but rather to look at it face on and to defeat it.
Seems like a good place to end it.
Yes, sir. And happy Easter, everyone.
Yeah, I hope that your Easter joy fills this entire season, for Christ is risen, and that's changed everything.
Yes, sir.
We're the Pinedo Brothers, Catholic filmmaking brothers working to revitalize the world of Catholic art.
Happy Easter.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Pinedo Brothers Podcast, an artist podcast for Catholics. We hope you enjoyed it, and if so, please consider subscribing, and commenting below. That really helps. This episode was edited and recorded by me, JP. Makeup was done by no one, if you couldn't tell. The Pinedo Brothers are Catholic filmmaking brothers working to revitalize the world of Catholic art through film. For more information on us, check us out at pinedobrothers.com. Thanks again.